I'm Tanya Fox, and you're listening to Fox Talks Business Podcast. I started my career in the corporate world, but always played to my own tune and loved to think outside of the box. This didn't always serve me well with the bosses, so I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And that little seed of entrepreneurial curiosity continued to grow as I branched out into retail, service, and franchise businesses. Now, I have been fortunate to have amazing successes in the last 2 decades, but they did not come without some really big failures and even bigger lessons learned. And that's why I started this podcast, not just to share the failures, but to show you how you can turn every failure into a success. We're going to hear from some amazing humans from around the world that are going to share their stories of the good, the bad, and the motivational entrepreneurial life has to offer. After all, life is too short to make all of the mistakes yourself, so why not learn from each other? And of course, we're going to have some fun, because as I always say, well, you know what? I'll tell you that at the end of the episode. Hello, Foxy listeners. Welcome to the show today. You know I love a guest that we end up talking before it even hits air. And I have so much in common already with my guest, Emily, today, just on our paths that I'm so excited to share. And I'm also excited to learn about the different experiences she's had with collaboration. But first, let's meet the guest. Emily, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Tanya. I'm really excited to be here.
So I've been deep diving you a little bit, but give the listeners who don't know a little bit about your history in the entrepreneurship.
Okay, I think I'm going to start where we just left off in our conversation before we hit record, which was in 2014 is when I finally got to start. I say finally because I've wanted to be an entrepreneur my entire life, and I've started like no short of like 200 businesses as a little kid, you know, all the newspaper businesses and the babysitting services and all of that stuff. So when in 2014, my husband and I actually ended up opening a retail shop together, and it was a little like random on the surface. It was organic mattresses and non-toxic bedding and home products. However, I had worked for somebody in that store prior to this in North Carolina. And in my head, while working for them, of course, I said to myself, oh, I can do this better. And so when we moved back up here to New Hampshire, where I live, we decided to go in on this. It made very good sense, like financially, like the revenue model was solid, and we had all of our ducks in a row. Like we presented the bank with this whole, thing, this presentation that I made on PowerPoint, and like we got a loan for the business. We rented a space, like we had everything all set to go, branding, website, the van with the wrap, all of the things. So about 4.5 years into that journey, I had a moment similar to yours where I was just like, I don't think retail is for me.
I don't like people.
I don't think I like this. There were a variety of reasons. I did not like going to I didn't like being stuck in one place. Mm-hmm. I like to be a woman of my own free roaming. And I wasn't really interacting with a lot of people on a regular basis. I mean, you can probably imagine like in an organic mattress store, you don't see that many people. Mm-hmm. You see them often on the weekends, but maybe not during the weekdays. So I just was kind of isolated on this little like island of entrepreneurship, if you will. So we made the decision that we were going to try to sell the business. And I had started working with a business mentor to help me do that. She was like helping me weigh my options of selling the business and also deciding what I was going to do next, which was a big piece of it, right? Like you have to kind of figure out like, okay, who am I? Like if I thought I was going to be doing this for the foreseeable future, now I have to figure out what's next. One thing she told me, I will never forget this advice. And I don't know why I didn't think of it is the sad part, but she sat me down and she basically said, you need to get out there and meet other people and like start collaborating with them essentially. And she specifically framed it in like people in this industry because we were trying to find a buyer. But I just kind of took that as a la carte invitation to meet everybody.
Yeah.
So I did. And actually, funny enough, a Facebook memory popped up today in 2017, which is when I first decided to like be on somebody else's podcast. Like I didn't even know back then what a collaboration was or how you go about finding them. Right. So when she sort of invited me to do that, I started collaborating with a lot of people, anybody and everybody. And it really was for me the stepping stone that brought me to the next thing. It connected me to a lot of people that I know now and work with now. It helped me actually grow like this whole online community, which is a separate story for a separate day. And it really did like teach me so much that I use every single day in my work. So I have to give all the thanks and all the credit to the whole journey, right? Like no regrets. And I'm very happy to be on the path I'm on now versus the path I was on in retail.
Well, and I think, like for me, it was sort of the same thing. When I got into collaboration, I didn't really know what I was doing. It wasn't until late, it's that hindsight thing, right? Like we were talking too, that we both got out of our businesses, our retail businesses in 2018. And in hindsight, we're like, boy, we really dodged that COVID issue and didn't have to deal with that. Like in hindsight, when I look back on, my 25-year career, I go, oh my God, I used collaboration a lot more than what I ever thought I did. Even when I was strategically planning, there was stuff that was happening in the background that I was like, oh, I didn't realize I was collaborating in my personal life. I was collaborating, with schools, with my, with my son, with his kids. Like there's just, it's like that thing where you buy a car and now all of a sudden everybody has your car and everybody has, that color. And you're like, oh my gosh, and it's always there. I always say to people, I think it's called like the Bader mean, like there's a, the red car theory that, there's so many different things for it. But I think it's just, you become aware of that world and all of a sudden you start seeing it everywhere. And
Yeah.
it's so much easier to go, oh, I see what you're doing there. I know what you're doing there. So for you, what was, when you started to do collaborations, what was one that you were like, you said that you sort of went on podcast shows. How were you making that a win-win to really make it go, yeah, this is an actual collaboration?
Okay, great. And I love that you use the term win-win because I say win-win-win, like it's a win
Yep.
for both of us and the person on the other side, right? So I would, because my store was focused on sleep and also my background is in health education, I knew a whole lot about sleep. And if there is one thing I know about the average American, they don't get good sleep.
And the
So
average entrepreneur.
yes, exactly. So my focus was really on like helping people with like sleep hygiene and learning about like some of the things that maybe were in their home that they should be aware of, like toxic wise, like bringing new products in. So that's sort of how I brought value because you're right. Like some podcast guests and radio guests, they want to go and talk all about themselves, which is fantastic on your website perhaps. But when you're showing up to a podcast interview, you really do have to show up giving value to the person on the other side. And I think that's a huge piece of collaboration in general that I think a lot of people miss right from the get-go. And that's a long-winded way of giving you my answer.
No, and I think it's so true because, it within collaboration, a lot of people, of course, because when you first start out, you're like, okay, why do I want to work with this person? What can they possibly offer me? And there is that, what am I going to get out of it at first? Because that's what gets you interested. But you're right. And I love that you say that, is that it was really important that it very quickly turns into, but how much can I overserve whoever it is that I want to work with? Because I think that's how you get that reciprocation. That's how you get those referrals and stuff like that. For you, though, how did you when did the light bulb go off that you were like, I really want to start to strategically use collaborations within my business?
Okay, great question. So I would do kind of things like I would host ladies' nights and chamber after hours and workshops and things like that in my shop. So I kind of did like an array of things. And then I also realized, oh, I'm also bringing people into my store. So
Mm-hmm.
even in those kind of situations, I was using it. I think the turning point for me was a friend and I got together, and I don't remember even how it came up, but we were just kind of looking at all of these women entrepreneurs in our area that didn't really have like a place to connect. And so we were like, let's create an event that is inspiring to them, right? Let's just put together this thing. It'll inspire a bunch of people. Well, 160 people turned up at that event. And after the event, so that was a collaboration, her and I collaborating. And after the event, 160 people wanted a place to keep on connecting. So I created like this kind of network, I would say, of more collaborations. And that's when I started to realize the power of it and the magic of it and how it can also help me. Like in my, at the time, I wasn't doing just copywriting. I was kind of doing all the things.
Yeah, I'll do everything. Yeah.
But it really was like using that collaboration. It actually ended up being like a direct feeder to my business. Like everybody started to learn who I was and what I did. And so I kind of got one-to-one clients through that opportunity. And I have to say, it was a lot of just like shining the spotlight on other people to make that happen, which I don't, that is naturally who I am. Like I like what you said about like, yes, we have to look at what's in it for us. And I agree. I always say like, go in having your own back and like protecting yourself and your business assets and all of those interests, and then put your dukes down, Yeah. And then like, we're all friends here. So yeah.
Well, and I think, when I look back, because we were just sort of doing this experiment and I was like, because I always get the question, like, what was your most profitable collaboration? And that question to me is always funny because I'm like, it depends what you mean by profitable, because most of the ones that I got so much out of were ones that I kind of backed away from, because I would have somebody go, I want to work with you because I know you do collaborations and it's really exciting. And I would be like, that's great. But like Jimmy is who you need to work with. Like, I think if I can connect the two of you together, you guys could do something like big and amazing. Yeah. So they'd connect together and off they would go. Like, and I was out of the loop. Like they were working together, they were doing it, and off they went. But there would always be like somewhere, and sometimes it was a week, sometimes it was a month, sometimes it was a couple of years, that person would all of a sudden come back and they would be like, hey, do you remember a couple of years ago when you introduced me to Jimmy? That worked really good. Could you do that again? And then I was like, yeah, absolutely. But all of these people were starting to like come into my funnel, and, sometimes the money was coming quickly, sometimes it wasn't. But some of my biggest collaborations, that were, money value, came out of those connections that I kept making.
Same.
And so I realized that, the more I could just connect people, the more I would just let karma, the universe, whatever you want to call it, I knew was eventually going to bring it back to me. And if I let go of timelines and just go, this will come back to me. I don't know how, I don't know in what way, but I just have to trust it will. It started getting a lot easier.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And the good feeling you get when you connect to people. I mean, that's the other thing. Like, how do you put a number on how you feel about a collaboration versus maybe one that was profitable and it did not feel good at all during the collaboration? So there's a lot of things. And also, I think every collaboration opens an opportunity. Like, we're basically coming together, creating something that has never existed before. I mean, even this, it's a simple conversation. Nobody's ever had this conversation. I mean, unless you believe in like the multiverse, but but nobody has ever had the conversation you and I are having. And the person listening right now, hello person, you've never heard these words said in the exact way. So like, and we don't know what it's doing for their lives. We don't know what new idea or insight or direction it will take them. Like the possibilities, there's no number for that,
Yeah. I love that. So let's talk about some fun stuff. Let's talk about the other side, because we're talking about, how collaborations work, but there's also the other side of it where sometimes it doesn't work. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? And I always say it's fun, hindsight is fantastic because you can laugh about things that weren't funny at the time. So talk to us about a time that you did a collaboration and it was not successful.
So I like to think every client I work with is a collaboration. And so I've definitely had, of course, like we all have, like my fair share of horror story clients. But I think the most impactful for me as a collaboration, the most I had to sit back and say, I need to get a little more intentional with how I'm choosing to collaborate with people and on what I'm choosing to collaborate with. Well, actually, I have two examples, but one, I lost a friendship in it. I mean, so we got together and we were doing an event, and our communication was not good, and it was on both of our parts. And we did not approach the situation with respect, trust, and maybe like the same level of excitement for what we were doing. And it ruined a friendship, I think. And it also ruined future collaborations from a business perspective with that person. So I think I took like two more stabs at it. And then I was like, oh my gosh, Emily, you got to stop.
Yeah.
Like, this is a pattern that keeps on repeating, and it's not going to get any better from here. So I like to now, I use that as information. If I'm not like immediately excited, okay, so if somebody approaches me and they want to collaborate, and I'm like, literally, I don't care what idea we come up with, but yes, we have to do this. That's how I want to feel. And it's, you know, it's not a perfect science. Like, they could propose an idea where you're like, okay, no, not that idea though.
Yeah.
Let's think of something else, because it has to align with your business too, obviously. But I just want to feel really good and really excited about what we're creating together, and also who I'm creating it with. I like to use just three really simple, like in the back of my mind, I like to think about these three things as sort of my own internal filter. Respect. There has to be like a mutual respect. I respect what you're bringing to the table. You respect what I'm bringing to the table. Trust. We have to trust each other. And then, like, I like to say, like, mutual delight. Like, we're both just excited. Like, I'm excited when I see a text from you. I'm not like, oh God,
Yeah.
you know?
What do you want me to
So
do now?
exactly. So those are the three things I really look for. And in this, you know, looking back on the situation, it was not that. The second bad one was a little more nuanced, and it was harder to see, because actually the woman is lovely and I still am friendly with her and I feel good about her. It's just our values were really, really misaligned. And if you dig a little bit under the surface, you see that she's deep down counter to everything we were kind of putting forward. And it's just like, oh my God. And a lot people knew it, you know, people could
Yeah.
see it. And for some reason, I just sort of went along with it. That one, as a great example of what we were talking about before, was very, very monetarily profitable. And
Right.
it's like, it's not like I wouldn't have done it, but I wouldn't do it again. I'll say
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. And those are the hard ones. I think that a lot of times people have a hard time of walking away, you know, because they go,
Mm-hmm.
I can't, I'm already in this. And I know when I'm coaching people on it, I'm like, there are times where you have to go, you know what, we're just going to stop this project right here. And
Yeah.
we're just going to put the fire out, and then we're going to walk away, because otherwise we're going to burn the whole forest down, and it's just not worth it. Right. And sometimes you just can't save it. You're just like,
Yeah.
it's dead. Just stop trying to revive it. It just needs to die, right? Like but those can be, can be hard to do, because people get really excited about, working with people who, they perceive bigger than them, or, could open up doors for them. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's very enticing.
Yeah, I have kind of like one of those use me meters where like you can feel it ticking up and you're like, oh, they're just using me. And I hate that feeling. So
Yeah.
I hear you on that. I recently I walked away from something. It hadn't started yet, which is great. So I work with a lot of web designers as a copywriter, and I have one. I just absolutely love her. Like, we have just such a good relationship. And I knew she was wanting to start a podcast. And I was like, well, I was shutting down a podcast that I had where it was like a guesting, podcast where I have guests on. And I was like, well, maybe we should start one together. Like, I just am like, I love you so much. Like, maybe we should just do another one. The reason I had stopped the first one is because I don't have time.
Right.
And so I'm like, so why am I doing this? So I did have to message her, and I felt so bad. Like, I was like, I'm so sorry. I just got really excited about like whatever you and I were creating together. And she was so understanding. And she's like, thank you for telling me and not just going along with it, because we don't play games here. Like, the two of us
Yeah.
have a good relationship. And it was such, I think it was a validation of like that I can say no, even if you like, even if you started a little bit down the path, you can still say, you know what, actually, the time is not right for me right now, or I don't have the capacity. And there don't have to be hard feelings. It doesn't have to be burning down, you know? And
Yeah.
that was it was a good experience to go through because it also reminded me that it's okay to have your own back, you know?
Yeah. And I think, I think when we all sit back and kind of, assess that at the time it might be disappointing, but afterwards we're always grateful because there's just more work that would be involved had you have gone through with it because she's having to follow up with you. You're feeling like, oh my God, I'm never getting this done. This is just like an extra thing that's on my list. And I think sometimes we, put too much pressure on ourselves to try to do everything and be everything for everybody we said we were going to. And the hardest thing is to go, I just don't have capacity to do this anymore. I got really excited, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm the same person, right? Like I'm like, this is so exciting. And then I have to sit down. Like I actually have like an old abacus. And if you don't know what that is, just look it up.
Oh,
But
I
it was
do.
from my son. And I'd like move it over and I'm like, this is my capacity of how many projects I can work on. Cause I get really excited and I forget how many projects are at home or are on the burner right now that I'm like, oh, it's okay. I'll just buy another stove. It'll be fine. I'll work it out.
Yeah.
But then I
Yeah.
realize I have to be careful because I want to make sure I can offer, 100% to each person I'm agreeing to work with. And I forget that capacity in my excitement. It's only afterwards that that I'm like, okay, well, now I need to take 3 months off because I've burnt out because I over offered, my excitement.
I think that's another huge piece of providing value to a collaboration is going 100% and being true to your word and following through on your word. Because I don't know about you, but I've been in collaborations where somebody says, oh, I've got that, or I'll do that, or I'll send that to you. And like months later, and you still haven't got
You're
them
like,
to
yeah,
take their, yeah.
hello.
To take their action steps. So I think that's really important. And I think that's a reason in and of itself to make sure that you're choosing wisely because you want to be the person that follows through on your word and doesn't say, oh, I got that when you really don't.
Yeah. What are some things that you do when so let's say you're in a scenario where you've decided to work with somebody, you want what you want to do with the collaboration. Are there some things that you do on a regular basis to make sure that those balls don't get dropped?
Yeah, I think communication up front is how we kind of first of all, I think meeting regularly, like if you are doing, let's say you're doing an event. So I'm doing like two local events and we meet regularly to have conversations about like what the next steps are, which I think is super helpful. And we also stay in contact as little things, like as little decisions need to be made. I think the hardest thing is when somebody's not available or you haven't made yourself available. So having the conversation up front, like we'll communicate via email, we'll communicate via text, like whatever you prefer is your communication method and like whatever works for your joint brains, that's how you set it up. I've used like project management tools and all of that stuff and it has gone both ways, right? Like some of
Yeah.
them have gone really well. I think the fundamental key is that the communication between you is like an open line in however you've established that to be. So I always ask, we always talk about that up front. And like, if at all possible, set the next meeting right there, right at the end of the
Yeah,
collaboration.
I
Like,
love
when are
that.
we
Yeah.
meeting again? So, and then sometimes it's so much easier. Like you almost have a language with some people where you don't need to say a whole lot and they just know what to do or everybody knows what to expect. So it comes in different ways. Yeah, I hope I answered that. Okay.
No, you did. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, that like you said, and you said a couple of times, which I think, if anybody writes anything down, and I agree with you, that communication and understanding which way the other person accepts communication well is really, really important. Because, like you said, some people, I've worked with some people who are like, I really need to see it written. They want to
Mm-hmm.
use like a program like Asana. Like I need to see it all spelled out and I need to see check marks. And I'm okay. Like I'm a type of person who I'm like, if that's what you need, I'm willing to do that. Whereas I have another one, which is a huge collaboration, which I thought for sure this person is going to want, those forms. They're going to want it spelled out specifically. And they're like, can we just Marco video back and forth? And then I can just go back and look. Like, that's what I would really like. And I was like, that surprises me. But I've learned to ask the question, how do you want me to communicate with you? How do you want to stay in touch? So I love that you mentioned that, because I think it's important to kind of go, and also to be clear with how you need to be communicated with. How is it that you're going to retain that information or get done? If you're a person who has 500 emails constantly in your inbox, then maybe emailing isn't what is going to get, your butt in gear, or going to get that fire to stay lit underneath you.
Yeah, I wanted to say, when you said, "Oh, I could Marco you, or I could Voxer you, or I could whatever," I am somewhat adaptable, right? But I know my limitations. Like, if a bunch of stuff comes through via vocal text where you can't save those messages at all, they just like disappear after you listen to them. I mean, I think you can hit keep, but anyway, they disappear. My brain is like, I don't know what to do with this. I haven't written it down. It's not organized. Like, it's gone. So if somebody gives me information that way, I know like that's not going to work,
Right.
I think having your own understanding of your own communication style, and then like, obviously sometimes it's finding a compromise, I think one thing you said, I want to like rewind back to it. You just, because I think about it all the time. I don't know if you ever did like group projects in school, but they weren't the easier way to do your homework.
There was always one person that you're like, come on, Jimmy.
Exactly. It's either like one person takes it all, or one person, isn't doing anything. Like, it's not the easier path. And I think we have to remember that. But the power and the value of a collaboration is so great that I think it is the worthwhile path. But you have to realize going in, like, there are other things to consider versus when you're just working by yourself. Like, by myself, I can communicate however I want to, right? Yeah. Does not matter. I can say whatever I want to. I can make decisions on my own. So it takes more intention, I'll say, than working by yourself. And I also think that the benefits of it are so much greater.
So on that vein, we've talked about sort of the downside of it. What was the favorite, thinking back, what was your favorite collaboration that you did? And you can give as much details as you want. Because I think when we share collaborations we've done, I think that's where, like you were saying, all the people that are out there go, ooh, I could do something with that. Or, ooh, that's interesting. So tell us about, either one that was, the most beneficial, most profitable, or even one that you were just like, I just loved every moment of this one.
Okay, I have a recent example. There's a local entrepreneurship organization that I like do volunteer mentoring for, and they wanted to do an event, and they were just like, we don't know what we want to do, but we want to collaborate with you. And I was like, great, same. So we put together, we called it a lean in business retreat. So we had all these local women. People, first of all, I said local, but they came from far and wide. It was actually quite shocking. And it was a totally free event. And I think that was also surprising for people, just the value of what we were able to put on, because they're a nonprofit, and it was like catered lunch, like very nice.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful day. Like, it was the kind of day that you get goosebumps thinking about. And it had different components of the day. Like, there was like a workshopping portion. There was like a meditation portion. There were like women connecting in small circles. And it was beautiful. And people were talking about it for weeks and weeks and weeks after. That, for me, I mean, a lot of those women's events I think are just like absolutely stunning, and you never know what is going to happen, but it's always great. That one is like my favorite. And do you know how much I got paid for that thing? $100. Yeah. Like, big whoopty. and it felt so good that I think that was like one of the most profitable ones for me. So
yeah. Well, and I always say, when I've worked with clients and we've done, multiple collaborations, I kind of go, what is the one collaboration you're going to do that is really beneficial to someone else. Because you always have to have that one. I always say, have that one in your roster where you're getting nothing from it, but like kind of a good feeling. And like for me, we have stars here in Alberta. So it's emergency helicopters for very bad cases. And so they're highly trained professionals, and they come in when you need to be airlifted somewhere. And I always MC their event. And I get people, you know, who say, you've done it for 7 years now, but you get paid. And I'm like, actually, I don't take payment from them. I totally do it for free. And every year I'm shocked when they're like, would you like to come back again? And I'm like, really? Because sometimes I push the envelope as an MC. I will say, like, sometimes stuff comes out of my mouth that I'm like, that was not on the script. And that might get me fired from this job. But they keep asking me to come back and I keep going. And to me, that is like, it is a no-brainer. It is marked off on my calendar every year. I get so excited about it. I have so much fun at this event. It's my way to kind of like give back and have that sort of good feeling. So although I consider it a collaboration, because it is, I'm going, yeah, I'm going to come. This is what I'm going to do for you. I promote the event and all that other stuff. There are those moments where I'm like, I feel like I get so much more out of doing this, because I also understand I'm in a room with people. Like, I make people pay me to go and eat first, right? Like, and I've done this for years. I'm like, okay, like I take bribe, like this is, and I'll say it again this year in November. If anybody's out there and is coming to Camrose, get a ticket for Stars. I promise you, you'll hear it. And I'm like, okay, I'm willing to take bribes. So if you're really hungry, the food smells super good, you can bribe me for your table to go first. And then we do an auction, right? And this is how it's all money raised and stuff. But like, I mean, people have paid like up to like $2,000 to $3,000 for their table to go first. Like they just throw
Oh
money,
my
right? Like, or I'm
gosh.
like, okay, the next person who can run up here with a crisp $100 bill, like you get to eat next. And like, I just try to do like fun stuff, right? And it's such an enjoyable thing for me. I know there's a part of me that, like, I'm sitting in a room with a lot of high rollers, people who are willing to kind of spend money for this beneficial event. So I know they're seeing my face and my name is getting out there. But truly, I've never like looked at the guest list and been like, oh, these people would remember me. I'm not schmoozing. I'm literally networking because it's a good cause, you
Mm-hmm.
know, kind of thing. And I think that that's something that I'm like, I don't know. It just brings me back home and it brings me so much joy. And especially when I get to meet somebody who's used, you know, who's had to use that, who's had to be, you know, air vac out, and hearing their story, I'm like, oh my God, like I can't even imagine, right? It's that sometimes, like you said, the profit for me is that good feeling.
I totally agree. And the desire to keep doing it again. Like that's
Yeah.
something we don't give enough credit to either. Is like if a collaboration goes really well and you keep on doing it, that's a success in and of itself.
Yeah, when you get that invite that they were like, okay, what do we do? Like that's the
Yeah.
most exciting thing, I think, for me when you finish a collaboration is sort of going, okay, so what now? What's the next thing
Yeah.
that we're doing? Like now what are
Yeah.
we doing? That to me, I'm like, oh, that was really successful.
Yeah. Instead of the post-mortem, right?
Yeah, where you're like, so thank you, goodbye. It was
Yes.
really nice.
What could we have done better? Everything.
Yeah. So when you're finishing a collaboration and it's closing down, what are some criteria? Like, do you have criteria to sort of say, okay, let's do something else, let's do something together? Or how do you kind of go, this worked or this didn't work? Do you sort of have things that you're like, you kind of have to hit the scale and this is how I know it was good?
Sometimes it takes me, sometimes I'll walk away from something and feel really good about it. And it takes me a little bit of time to process like some of the things that maybe happened along the way.
Right.
And actually, I'm thinking of one specifically where, you know, sometimes you will like post conversation it with the other collaborators, see how they felt about it, see how you felt about it, see what you could have changed, what went, what was well. And sometimes I've had to actually talk my feelings out with someone else to
Mhm.
really understand what was going on. Like sometimes it was so nuanced and like sticky and weird that I'm like, I actually have to figure this out with somebody else because on paper it looks good, or you know, I'm feeling good about it after the day, but it felt terrible leading up to it. You know, so looking at
Right.
those things. So I think that, you know, it depends on what kind of person you are. So I know about myself that I tend to get really excited. And then, like, when I step back, sometimes I'm like, oh, wait, that was not exciting. Or if something's hard going through it, but then it ends up really good, I might kind of see that part and not see the hard part. Right.
Right.
So I do need to give myself time and like figure out my own feelings and my own thoughts before moving forward. Now my criteria is that I'm really looking to, I can't even say it's like only my criteria, but it needs to be aligned with where my business is going. So, like, I really sit down and ask myself, is this totally out of my lane? Or like, am I veering all over the place and trying to do all the things again? Or is this aligned with my business? And is it moving me forward along my business path, or is it kind of like a step back? Because it doesn't mean it's wrong if it's a step back, or a side step, right? But it's not where I want to be focusing like all my time and energy right now. So those are sort of my criteria right now as I move forward in things. And I have some categories that I'm focusing on, like I'm focusing on local events versus virtual because
Mhm.
kind of tired of virtual events.
We're all excited about, yeah, like it's now coming back around again.
Yeah. And then I'm also focusing on like I love because I changed my podcast to just be sort of now I only have one show and it's just solo. So now I'm like I like having conversations like this where you and I are sharing on your platform maybe new ideas that you haven't talked about yet and the person on the other side is benefiting from that too. So those are sort of my two is like local things and then podcast interviews. And I collaborate with website designers like all the time. Like I said, I consider clients like a collaboration. But I hope that was a concise enough answer. I guess my criteria is partly how I feel,
Yeah.
but really looking for that like alignment with what my trajectory is right now.
Well, and I love that because I think this is key for anybody who's listening is making sure that you aren't veering off into a side road too much because that happens quite often, right? Where we get really excited about working with somebody, but the avenue or the road that they're taking doesn't really match up. But you're like, but I just want to get into their wheelhouse. Meanwhile, you veer so far off that it causes a lot of confusion to the people
Yeah.
that, are actually watching you going, oh, oh, so she's not doing copywriting anymore. Like she's doing,
Yeah.
we're back to the betting. No, we're not doing, sorry, what are we doing again? Right. And it can cause confusion with how you're making money, which at the end of the day is what we need to stay focused on. Or it doesn't matter what you're doing. You can't afford to do any of it.
Yeah, great points. We don't want to be confusing people on the other side because that's taking multiple steps back.
Yeah. Well, and I like what you said too about really assessing like what was working and what was not working, through the whole thing, because this is the one area that I think, no matter how many years I've worked with people, they hate doing, right? Because I'm like, you need to write down all of the stuff you did. And like, I give
Hmm.
them a sheet and it's called an anger journal. And I'm like, every time you get like upset or something isn't working, I want you to write it down. I don't want you to look at it.
Hmm.
I don't want you to assess it. We'll do it after you're done this collaboration. But then I can sort of look back and go, oh no, this was just, I was just, whatever. I needed chocolate that day. That wasn't that big of a deal. But again, with that hindsight, you could go back and go, oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, that was, that took a lot, because sometimes we forget about, because like you said, you get that euphoria when it comes and it was successful and it worked out, that sometimes it's harder to look back. So keeping those notes as you go through is really important. And you never have to share them. Like I'm like, nobody needs to know you felt this way about Susan. Like that you were like, she's a mess. Like she's an absolute mess. And I've had it where I just did one recently where the collaboration was fantastic. It was going really good. Right in the middle of this year-long collaboration, she ended up going through a very nasty divorce. And although she was lovely and it was working, her life fell apart. And so
Yeah.
everything else along with it fell apart too. And so it wasn't that there was anything against her, but it was just like, I don't want to, I became a counselor in the middle of that. And I'm like, one, I'm not, I am not uh educationally certified enough to be a marriage counselor to anybody. And it was just really difficult, right? Because
Yeah,
you're
it's
also kind of going
draining.
like, I don't want to let this person down, and I don't want to be another person that walks away from her. And again, 25 years doing this, and I was still like, I don't want to be the next one who leaves her. Like I felt trapped. And it wasn't until hindsight of looking at my notes going, oh yeah, I forgot that sort of happened. And I saw that other side.
That is brilliant to keep an anger journal, because it's even happened with clients where like by the end I'm like, oh, but their website's so great. Everything
Yeah,
is so
it was
great.
so
Like they're,
pretty.
and then they come back to you and they're like, can you do this for me? And you're like, sure, why not? And then you're right back in the same exact cycle.
And the
So
same loop. Yeah.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
not, like I say to people, because a lot of people are like, what? And to me, it started because I was at a bunch of women's conferences and it was all like, write 100 things that make you happy. And I was like, if one more person tells me to journal happy shit, I'm going to lose it. Right. Like I was just like, this isn't helping me do anything. And so for me, that started out as just trying to figure out why was this stuff not working? When you get that feeling where you're like, why does this keep happening to me? I was like, why do I keep getting upset? And I realized again, when I started writing down this stuff, I realized I was allowing the same things to happen to me over and over and over again. So by doing it, I was able to go, do I need to set a boundary with this? Do I need to watch out for this? Is this something that I need to go, oh, and by the way, hard line on this. Like if you
yeah.
do this, you're out. Like we will break up. This is this is how you end the relationship with me right here. So it's sometimes I think it's a difficult thing to do because people get too stuck in I'm being really, really negative. And it's not about being negative. It's just about going, I want to remember this so that when I do an assessment, I'm assessing everything, the good and the bad of both people, because mine will also be like, I totally dropped the ball. I said I was going to have
Yeah.
this delivered and I did not, and then I can go back and assess why was I not delivering on my stuff as well? Was it because I was overexerting myself? Did I say yes to too much, which is usually the case? It's a good assessment tool that sometimes we just want to look at the good stuff. We want to say, it was all happy. But in the meantime, you're like, but to get to that happy, we walked through lava.
Yeah.
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 It was a shit storm. We just came out of the other end and now there's a rainbow. But like, hey, it was a hailstorm.
Yeah, that is so awesome. And I've heard somebody share a resentment journal as a way to combat like burnout, and same thing, just like looking at like what's not working and why. So I love that tool. I will be using that henceforth.
And I think, it's not something that you want to stay, it's like rock. I always say it's like watching true crime documentaries. They're great and we all love them because we like going,
Yeah.
I can't believe these people exist. But if you watch them on a loop for too long, you go to a dark place.
Yeah. Totally.
Right.
Funny
And
because
it's
I
the same
just got
thing.
into those.
Oh, me too. I was like, I need to kind of stop watching 48
Yeah.
hours because I don't know. I'm starting to be like, I think I could get away with it. And I was like, as soon as I start thinking that, I'm like, it's time to put it down.
I
Let's,
always am just like, who's gonna murder me next? Like who?
well, and if my husband's like, I think you need to turn it down because I'm also like, listen, no, I will never commit suicide. If that happens, I was murdered. Here's
Yeah.
what you like. And he's like, all right, could you just like watch some cartoons or something for a little bit? And I'm like, done.
Funny.
So what is coming up for you? What do you have like collaborations that are in the works that you can talk about? What is it that you're working on right now that is getting you that excitement that is one of your criteria?
Okay, these are fun and maybe ideas for listeners too. So one I'm doing with a friend through the Chamber of Commerce, and we're just doing your business questions answered for
I
chamber
love that.
members, and well, anybody can come, but there's chamber and non-chamber kind of thing, and it's basically going to be like she's like a tech guru, like when you just want to bang your head against the computer because you're like nothing is working. She's that person that can fix all those things for you. And then I am going to step in as like marketing and helping people with like messaging and content creation and things like that. So we're just doing a day. Literally, the day will create itself based on who is in the room, what questions they ask, what direction we go. And we'll have some like educational stuff like in place in case nobody has any questions, which I don't know why you'd sign up for something about questions, but it's going to be great. Like a nice round table sort of we don't know what to expect yet. And the second one I'm doing is like in December with another collaborator, another friend. We're going to be doing like a clean out your business closet before the new year. So just like a cohesive, like get everything in line, make sure everything is cohesive on every platform. She's doing like a life joy, like making sure everything is kind of like what you want to be in your life and in your business. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we're splitting that into 2 full day like intensives, and those are my next 2, and I think that'll kind of take me to the finish line for the year,
to the end of the year. Yeah. Well, and I love this because I think, even if, you don't have somebody else in mind that you're doing it, even just taking the idea of having like a round table or having, questions, of getting people to ask you questions that you can answer. It's the easiest way to create content. It's the easiest way to know, your clients. And sometimes we forget, if our clients are asking us, that means somebody else is thinking about it, right? And quite often I will answer, someone will message me and go, how do I do this? And I just answer it. Right. It's easy. It's I don't think of it. It's super easy for me. But then somebody else will say it and I go, oh, you just do this. And they're like, how did you think of that? Oh my God. And I'm like, I do it all the time. Right. I find sometimes if you're going, oh my God, that's too easy, I guarantee somebody else finds it really, really difficult. Do you find that as well? That you're like, no, it's this, what are you talking about? Like,
yeah,
I can't charge
totally.
people for that. It's too easy. Meanwhile, people are like, can you build a rocket and get me to Mars too?
I think I just had that conversation with someone earlier. She's like, it was a consult call. And she's like, I learned so much just on this call. And I'm like, I don't know what I shared, but okay.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked for you. Yeah. Well, and I always say to people, I feel like that's when you're in your zone of genius, when you're like, it's really, really easy for me. That's who I'd want anybody doing anything. Like I always think medical, I'd want my doctor coming in going, oh no, we're just going to do this and we're going to take out and we're going to move this and it'll be fine. You'll be great.
Yeah.
But I'm like, that's the doctor I want, not the one who's like, this is going to be hard.
Yeah, agreed.
So be that person in business. I love that. So if people are wanting, if they're in your area or even if they're, just kind of going, I feel a connection. I feel like I want to talk to Emily more. What is the best way that they can find you and find out some of the stuff that you're doing?
Okay, so EmilyAborn.com, it's just like acorn with a B, is the easiest way. And we can have fun on Instagram, which is where I follow you, and wherever you like to hang out. LinkedIn, I'm in the normal places. But yeah, like if you need, I'm thinking like if you need help with coming up with the copy for an event or something like that, I'm totally interested in chatting with you about that. And I have a podcast called Content with Character, which I think is an easy jump if you like listening to podcasts and this is like up your alley to learn about. You can just hop over there and follow me there. And I had so much fun with you. I feel like you just like opened my brain up to all of these things. I talk about collaboration all the time, and you open up my brain to all of these new things I had not even thought of, or you said them in a different way. And I admire you so much in that. So we literally created a conversation that has never existed here today.
I love that. And we're going to be doing it again because same way. I had so much fun and my brain's already going on, oh, there's some other ideas I've got to throw out. I've got to write down. So it was just an absolute pleasure. We're going to make sure we have all of the links where you can find Emily, her podcast, learn more about all of the stuff that she does, because it's not just collaborating. There's so much more. So you're going to want to make sure that you click on those links to stay connected to her as well as to our show. Emily, it was a pleasure.
Thank you, Tanya.
I had so much fun. My cheeks are sore from how much I was smiling, both on air and off air with Emily. She is just a wealth of information. We didn't even get to some of the stuff that she does for her business around copywriting. So I really want to encourage you to head to the show notes and make sure that you check out all of the links for the amazing work that she does. I love that she shared so many ideas of things that she's doing with collaboration. And I hope you take these ideas and take a moment to just sit back and think, is this something that I can use in my business? When she was talking about some of the events that she created, is this an event that would work in my community? Is this something that maybe I could spearhead here in my local area or virtually with my community or work with somebody else that I've always admired that maybe has the same idea. So this is why sharing stories of how other people are using collaboration is so important to me. I think this is what helps to get that out of the box thinking going. It's what helps us to kind of start generating the ideas. And it's the little spark we need to get the flame going to start something ourselves. And what I love the most that Emily shared is there are just very simple ways that you can get started in using collaboration, sometimes to the point where you don't even know that you're doing it. Her story is so, so intriguing. And I've listened to a few of her podcast episodes, and there is a lot of information there. So you're going to want to make sure that you head and listen to some too. In the show notes, I'm actually going to post a couple of the episodes that I listened to that gave me great ideas. And I want to hear your feedback on those episodes as well. So let's start a collaborative conversation going around that. Emily, thank you again so much for coming on the show, for being so open and so sharing. And no matter what it is that you, Emily, you, the amazing Foxy listeners, are doing, make sure, as I always say, that you take time each and every single day to stop and have fun. Because as I always say, if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?